God is glorified in the good news proclaimed, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, his Son, from the grave. Welcome to the missionary moment of SonRise Community Church on this Resurrection Sunday. How appropriate, because the missionary message is, he is risen. He's high and lifted up, and he's returning to manifest his kingdom, which he will accomplish by executing judgment upon the world and embracing the joy of his elect as they are gathered to him. Every tribe, every tongue, and every nation. But missionary work is difficult. There are many obstacles to overcoming advance of the gospel to the ends of the earth. I believe that our awareness at SonRise of these obstacles will increase our desire and demonstrate our interest in genuine prayer and in generous provision that will encourage each of our missionaries in the life and work to which God has called them. Last month, Bill and Debbie Abbots did a great job of giving us an experience with one of those obstacles, language. Language learning and proficiency are necessary for missions. So we must pray for our missionaries that they will make progress in the ongoing need to communicate accurately, not just with the pronunciation of words, but with accuracy of understanding, of grammar, and of context. So we begin with language, but in the end, it's really secondary to a lifelong obstacle of learning, and that has to do with culture, cultural understanding and interpretation. This obstacle has everything to do with how people behave, the way that they think, what they value in life, and ultimately what they as a people group understand or how they define what is integrity. Missionary assumptions about differences that they encounter often defaults them into offending people or making judgments of people that are wrong and based on not having the facts. These kinds of responses will deepen the cultural divide between them and their people and ultimately may destroy their heart for the very people that they came to serve and to love. We often call this cultural stress, but cultural stress undealt with will lead to cultural shock, which will paralyze their progress towards effective ministry, and sometimes will even delve them into discouragement and the depths of depression. Add to this the pressure of a worldwide pandemic. You're experiencing it, aren't you? We all are. But they're in a country of service that is viewing and responding to this situation far differently than we think or how we do. They face the dangers of little or no medical resources, and there's confusing actions and decisions that are being made, restrictions being placed on them that can easily increase their fear of survival in the land in which they're in. But add to the top of that a sense of failure because in the time of greatest opportunity, they're unable to go out and meet the needs of the people that they love. SonRise family, please know that our own missionaries are far more lonely, discouraged, and maybe even depressed than we realize. So to help us understand that, let me give you an example, a story of a cultural confusion and difference that was experienced by a family. Dwayne Elmer accounts this in his book, Cross-Cultural Servanthood, and he tells about his family going to visit a village in Kenya. And as they enter the village, they know that they will meet the chief of the Maasai people first. And so they tell their son that when the chief comes up, they ask him to step forward to the chief and bow his head. And then the chief will place his hand upon him and he will give a greeting. This is the way of the Maasai children. They knew that much. And they wanted to honor the king by this act through their own son. And so the son stepped forward and he waited. And the chief spit on his head. 3 times he spit on his head. Let me pause here. How would you respond to that if someone spit on your child that way? Now, this didn't happen in the time of pandemic, but we're thinking about masks to keep spray from going from us to spread disease. And although it's not during that time when this story happened, American missionaries, Western missionaries struggle with uncleanliness in disease-filled lands. And so it may be a normal response to repel against this. So let me go back to the story and tell you what happened. The boy immediately stepped back and looked up at his mother and said, "That man spit on me. He spit on me." And his mother looked at him and said this, "Yes, and we must wait and see what that means." And then the chief stepped forward to the parents, and he greeted them in a more traditional Western way. What a wise response from this mother. She knew something of the importance of culture, the ignorance of a culture, and the necessity of learning a culture, rather than coming to a quick conclusion as to what had just happened. Now, the answer that they were looking for meeting didn't come in that visit. It didn't come for a long time, until they were talking to someone else who knew the Messiah people quite well, and they recounted for them what this was and asked what it meant. And the person who heard it laughed and said, "Oh, they do this all of the time." For you see, the Messiah people believe that when it rains on their arid land, that God is spitting, or that God is blessing them. And so they have interpreted that as the way to bless others. And the Messiah chief was giving a threefold blessing upon the son. Now, the son didn't feel like he was being blessed, but that's really what was happening. It's important for us to understand that our missionaries encounter a multitude of events and occasions on a daily basis, weekly basis, throughout their lives on the mission field that they don't fully understand and that are difficult and confusing for them to know. And so we need to pray for them that they'll respond with wisdom and patience and knowledge so that they'll learn, be ready to learn, and work hard to learn all of their lives the culture that God has placed them in, so that they can have a greater impact of the gospel in their lives, which will be seen through biblical churches planted and strengthened and multiplied even beyond their lives. All for the glory of God and the risen Savior, Jesus Christ. A great response for you and me would be to communicate with our missionaries about this very thing. Ask them some questions about the differences that they encounter in the culture that they're living in and what they've learned about what those differences mean. Ask them how they're holding up to the stress of living in a confusing and different culture. It's okay to ask them, do you get lonely? Are you often discouraged? And do you even get depressed, and does that sometimes linger? And then let them know that you are aware, that you care for them, and that you are praying for them as they face these difficult challenges. What a great way for us to serve our missionaries, by being aware of the obstacles that they encounter. Let's also encourage them through our faithful and generous giving, which you can do on this second Sunday of the month by dropping a check in the mail or through our online giving portal of our website. I would also say that if you have been attending SonRise for some time, and especially if you're a member and you've not given towards our missionaries in the past, this would be a good time to begin. Would you prayerfully consider beginning today? Thank you. And may God bless you and encourage you in your participation with us in the advance of the gospel to the ends of the earth through our missionaries. May they know and may they proclaim the joy that He is risen.